Nintendo is a company that has always put meticulous attention to detail at the very forefront of everything they do. Their games are known for being inventive, creative, and stylistically dazzling, even back in the 80s when video games were still figuring themselves out. That being said, everyone has skeletons in their closet, sources of cringe that inspire just a little bit of shame and embarrassment. Nintendo's is most likely the set of Zelda games that came out for the Philips CDI system, which had little input from Nintendo and famously lacked everything that makes a Zelda game great. We'll see if they're as bad as people say when I complete Zelda, the Wand of Gamelon. So the holidays are here, guys. Happy holidays, I guess. And I'm excited to say that we are doing a fire sale over at the Yeti. TheYeti.com/TheCompletionist, TheYeti.com/SuperBeerBros. We are getting rid of all of our stock there. Most designs are on sale, massive discounts, including things like hats, hoodies, and mugs. So please, if you want to get in on that, we're doing this fire sale from now until the beginning of December. So if you want to get on that, go to TheYeti.com/TheCompletionist or TheYeti.com/SuperBeerBros. The more you buy, the more you save. Fire sale. Woo, it's hot. It's so hot. I can't even wear it. Get it off me. Buy it. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another brand new episode of The Completionist. Anyone who's been a long-time fan of the channel knows that I have a fascination with games of all types. Good, bad, independent, AAA. I love finding out for myself if an amazing game is worth completing, or if a bad game is as terrible as the internet says that it is. Welcome back to Zelda month, and ever since I did Mario's Missing here a while back, a couple of people have been blowing me up in my comments asking me to look at the CDI Zelda games. I've always been weirdly curious about these games, mainly how and why do they exist, and are they actually any good? Are they best left to the 1993 era like Snoop Dogg, or can we bring them to the current climate like Snoop Lion? I don't think anyone really likes the name Snoop Lion, do they? I think he went back to Snoop Dogg. Either way, today we are completing Zelda, the Wand of Gamelon. Yes! The Wand of Gamelon occupies a strange place in video game history. Nintendo signed off on it, but it lacks almost any of the polish gamers have come to expect of a Nintendo game. It's another one of those weird Nintendo experiments that pays off in some ways, but in many other ways, it absolutely does not. It is impossible to talk about this game without mentioning what the heck the Philips CDI is. Most people probably haven't even heard of it. I hadn't really, not until I started researching for Wand of Gamelon. The device is basically a computer without any of the main things that make a computer useful, like a mouse, or a keyboard, or a monitor, or even processing power. CDI stands for Compact Disc Interactive, and basically allowed the system to play audio CDs and a few other specially formatted CDs. It was marketed mainly as a tool for educational games, and I use that term loosely. Picture a barely functional Sony PlayStation with no backing and you've got an idea. Here's where things get very weird. Nintendo bizarrely agreed to license out the Legend of Zelda name to Philips because Nintendo briefly considered a Philips CDI add-on for the Super Nintendo system. My buddy Norm, the gaming historian, has an awesome video about how Nintendo developed an add-on floppy disk device for the Famicom because they were convinced that floppies were the future. While it clearly seems like the wrong call now, it makes sense that Nintendo was considering some kind of disk add-on for the SNES. You probably heard the rumors of how Sony and Nintendo were working together to make an SNES CD kind of system, essentially confirming / not confirming the existence of a Sony Nintendo PlayStation. This Philips CDI deal is actually a part of that saga. Nintendo decided to partner with Philips instead of Sony, which led to Sony developing the PlayStation. After that, Nintendo decided to pass on Philips too and scrap the Nintendo CD project entirely, but not before agreeing to let them make some Zelda games with seemingly no strings attached. You know how in Batman Begins, Batman basically lets Ra's al Ghul die by saying, "I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you either," something like that. That's kind of how Nintendo let Philips develop these games. There was practically no input or oversight from Nintendo to developers' animation magic, and very little development time at all. There were 3 games with Zelda characters released for the CDI. Note that I'm avoiding saying 3 Zelda games released for the CDI, because these games barely resemble what we recognize as a Zelda game. I'm not saying Nintendo was trying to bury the games for the CDI, but let's just say there were an awful lot of shovels lying around. Now, there are thousands of videos on YouTube of people dumping on these games, and that kind of seems to be their legacy. What's strangest to me is that Zelda Wand of Gamelon, Link Faces of Evil, and Zelda's Adventure all came out after A Link to the Past, one of the greatest games of all time. Nintendo sort of swept these games under the rug and continued like they never really existed. But I still want to see everything this game has to offer. Completing Wand of Gamelon should be a pretty straightforward experience, since there aren't any alternate endings or deep, dark secrets to be found. More so than the Zelda games we all know and love, this one is very much story-driven. Pretty much all I have to do to complete this game is to make it to the very end. In order to do that, I'll be going from area to area, finding several key items that move the plot forward. I'm taking a little comfort in the fact that at the end of the day, it's all about defeating Ganon and having a little happily ever after moment to myself. What makes me nervous is this game's reputation. It is supposed to be atrociously difficult. The controls are legendarily terrible. The cutscenes agonizing. The puzzles obscure. I've played nearly every other Zelda game, but Wand of Gamelon is so far removed from the core Zelda experience that it might be more difficult than I imagined. But hey, I'll persevere because I've never let a bad game get me down or lost my sanity because of how absurd completing a terrible game is. Definitely never done those things. Zelda, the Wand of Gamelon, is infamous for its presentation. It's shocking how rough the complete package is. Everything is devoid of any Nintendo charm, and any interesting experiments that the game tries to do gets lost in the mess. I had heard some rumors about bad cutscenes and maybe seen a couple of gameplay screenshots, but nothing compares to seeing how absolutely bonkers everything looks altogether. The game begins when the King Harkinian sets off to aid the Duke of Gamelon, who is under attack by our old buddy Ganon. The king tells Zelda that if she hasn't heard from him within a month, to send Link as backup. A month goes by with no word, so Link sets off. But after even more time passes with no word from the king or Link, Zelda decides to take matters into her own hands to rescue everyone and stop Ganon herself. Seeing the story laid out like that doesn't sound so bad. It's a princess empowerment story for Zelda, who is an awesome character who doesn't have much agency in the older titles. But the execution is just abysmal. Most of the story is told through FMV cutscenes, which are hilariously, shockingly awful.
Just pick what you want. I'll handle the rubies.
From the voice acting to the animation itself, it feels like everything was made in MS Paint and then brought to life. The tone is wildly inconsistent throughout. On the one hand, you've got 90s Ratitude Link, and on the other, the legitimately terrifying cutscenes that show bad guys melting into piles of goo with pulsating hearts. Even the gameplay reflects some of this inconsistency. It's a grand adventure where the player is blocked at every turn by locked doors or the need to collect extremely specific items. I think one of the most disappointing things is how divorced from anything Zelda related the entire universe of Wand of Gamelon is. The player isn't even exploring Hyrule. Where the heck is Gamelon? So many questions, and all I get is confusion when I try and answer them. The game is divided into an overworld and actual levels. The overworld looks kind of like a generic fantasy world map. There are mountains, towns, deserts, castles, all the things you'd expect in a D&D campaign. But once again, this ain't D&D. Where's Lake Hylia? The Lost Woods? It's baffling to me that this game came out long after A Link to the Past and drew absolutely no inspiration from it. It's possible Nintendo put a stop on that, but if that was the case, then why let the devs have access to the characters at all? Which leads me to the cutscenes. Yes, they are more insane and incoherent than you can possibly imagine. The way the characters move, the way their eyes pierce into my very soul, the sounds of their voices.
Whatever I see, I shall devour.
Everything is just so wrong. My jaw actually dropped hearing Link say, "I'm so hungry I could eat an Octorok." There's an easy joke to be made here about how this is why you never hear Link talk in Zelda games, but it goes so much deeper than that. Every little thing in these cutscenes seem flagrantly designed to make Zelda fans upset. The Triforce has always been kind of a MacGuffin in the Zelda canon. It's often portrayed as something that's inside of Zelda, Link, or Ganon, this metaphysical, magical artifact. In this game, it's whatever the developers want it to be. Impa uses the Triforce of Wisdom as Google Maps to see what's on the other side of the world. And the thing basically looks like a little blue floating pyramid you would see in geometry class. The king says that the Triforce of Courage will protect him when he goes on his journey, but there's absolutely no indication of what he's talking about, and clearly it doesn't work since he gets captured anyways. Characters are invented out of nowhere whenever the script needs someone new to hand out or request a new item. A prime example is someone like a greedy shopkeeper or an Antonio Banderas looking wayfarer type guy. I can't get over the fact that Nintendo let it come out like this. There are some things that kind of work. The actual gameplay levels have an interesting look to them, sort of a painted quality that's a nice artistic choice, but that clashes with the character models, which are just plain ugly. Nothing ties together neatly in any way. You might be thinking, hey, at least maybe the music might be good because Zelda games are renowned for their music, and surely the extra power of the CDI would lead to a memorable score. You, my friend, thought wrong. It's weird 90s beats all the way throughout, baby. Nothing mystical or memorable about it. Look, at the end of the day, the more I look at this game, the more flabbergasted and confused I become. It's a Zelda game in name only, and the more I look at the details, the more enraged I get. They don't even call rupees rupees. They call them rubies.
Sorry, Zelda. Not enough rubies.
What is happening here? What have I gotten myself into? You know, despite the abysmal presentation that showcases next to nothing unique about the Zelda universe, and cutscenes that will live forever in infamy, at least this game has atrocious gameplay throughout! Sorry, that's what I call a bait and switch. You thought I was gonna say something positive about the gameplay, didn't ya? Woo, you are wrong, sucker. This game will not cater to you. This game borrows a little gameplay from Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, but introduces its own unique terribleness throughout. The player controls Zelda along a 2D plane, and one of the few positive moves that the game makes. It's fun to see Zelda depicted as a sword-waving, shield-hefting warrior, even if it can be disempowering to get absolutely bodied by any enemy whatsoever. Basically, Zelda explores levels until she finds an obstacle she can't overcome, then finds the item that lets her progress. This is indeed a Zelda trope, but the way it's implemented in Wand of Gamelon is not nearly as fluid as other Zelda games. A shopkeeper will scream at you to find more rubies so you can buy bombs, or a mysterious homeless blacksmith will obliquely mention needing a heat stone with no direction of what to do. It's all of the worst gameplay parts of Castlevania 2 with all of the roughness of my little cousin's coloring book. It's often difficult to tell where a platform ends when Zelda is running around on a level. Everything kind of runs together, and as a result, it's extremely hard to tell how to get to things that are climbable. In other better Zelda games, there are often indicators of how to interact with the world. Walls that can be bombed have cracks in them. Locked doors have giant, great big keyholes. And the player character can pick up items by simply walking over them. Not so much so in the Wand of Gamelon, where Zelda stumbles into a pit she can't climb out of and won't know that a door is locked until she physically walks up and it blares "locked" at her. Rubies must be slashed with your sword before they're officially collected. everything is defined by an enormous and confusing lack of feedback. Like when I tried to reach out to the Department of Water and Power to find out why my shower isn't working. You know how in most other video games, the player character gets a moment to recover after being hit by an enemy? Super Mario goes to Small Mario, but gets like 3 seconds of invincibility, allowing him to run through King Koopa to get to an axe on the other side of the bridge, right? In the Wand of Gamelon, there are 0 invincibility frames. This means that the lowliest enemy can absolutely destroy Zelda in seconds by literally walking into her. It makes progression frustrating to say the least. There's sort of a crude checkpoint system in that if you die in a room, you can restart in that same room a couple of times. Die too often though, and you're kicked back to the overworld where you can keep beating your head against the same wall or try and explore a different area. You know, thinking about it, that's another interesting thing about the Wand of Gamelon. It plays more like an adventure game than anything else. The player can go from town to town pretty easily, but will eventually find their progress blocked until they find a key item. It's a very loose structure, and I guess it works in theory, but the execution is rough around the edges, just like every sprite that appears on screen. The roughness doesn't just apply to the graphics though. Combat in this game is like trying to run my fingers through Wallace's fur after he's been rolling around in the mud. Sticky, messy, and ultimately very sad. Zelda does have a shield and a sword, but until you upgrade the sword to shoot beams, you have to deal with extremely spotty hit detection in general, especially trying to block things. Zelda can block almost any oncoming projectile as long as she's standing still, but it's a lost cause if she's being attacked from any sort of angle. Some enemies like to attack on a diagonal, and my advice in those situations is to scream, "Oh, come on!" and watch Zelda get mowed down by a freaking pterodactyl. Interestingly, there are boss characters that show up. Even Iron Knuckle makes an appearance in one of the few actual references to the Zelda universe in this strange alt-world Zelda game. However, Zelda doesn't really fight them. The boss fights are basically won in cutscenes by Zelda using a magic item to utterly destroy them in weirdly graphic ways. I'll never forget the way that suit of armor with lips explodes into a goddamn flock of goddamn crows. Completing this game almost drove me up a flippin' wall. It's archaic in a way that feels cruel. Again, I'm just shocked that this game was kind of a follow-up to A Link to the Past. It feels like a massive step backwards because trying to collect key items means that Zelda has to basically find and talk to every NPC multiple times until they finally tell her exactly what they need to do to move forward. I wish people would do that in real life. I've had enough trial and error, but in a game like this, it just feels flat out annoying. The terrible combat and obtuse puzzle solving nearly had me in tears the more hours I put into this game. I clawed my way through to witness every terrifying cutscene, all the way to Ganon's demise. And I really have to say, after seeing everything this game has to offer, it is not worth it. See? Bait and switch again. Get bopped on. There's just nothing here. No magic armor, no secret dungeon, there are no upgrades to the magic meter, nor was there a magic meter to begin with. This is one of those games that once you make it through, that's all there was to it. I can hear the king's derisive laughter now, and I feel like a fool. Completing this game didn't make me punch a hole in my screen or wreck me emotionally or anything like that, but it did leave me with an extensive list of questions. So here we go. Why make these subpar Zelda games in the first place? Why release them after making sure every detail of A Link to the Past and even Link's Awakening for Game Boy was perfect and memorable years before the CDI was set to release these games? Why give Link the most annoying character voice of all? Why would Nintendo bother licensing out official Zelda characters and then not bother to see what the developers were churning out? Why does the king's laugh follow me wherever I go? Why do enemies in the very first area of the game pose a bigger threat than Ganon himself? Why is Link trapped in a mirror? And what will happen if I throw a mirror on the ground in my office? Why is the Triforce of Wisdom a softball-sized rotating Viagra pill? The more I think about it, the more confounded astounded I am. I wish I had answers to some or even any of these questions. What I do have is a headache from trying to determine how to navigate the drowned water look of the world, and a slight anxiety attack every time I see Zelda's vacant deadpan stare during a cutscene. When I completed Zelda the Wand of Gamelon, there were 67 deaths, 1 Triforce of Wisdom used to spy on more people than the FBI, 1 magic blanket that turns enemies into dust, 0 Hyrule landmarks visited, 3 mind-numbingly difficult hours played, and 1 Gerard who really wanted to say, "Excuse me, princess," every 5 seconds. Even though I know that it isn't even from this game. Sue me. Video game development is an extremely strange business, and the 90s was pretty much the Wild West for developers trying to get on Nintendo's good side. Ultimately though, Zelda the Wand of Gamelon, best left forgotten, and definitely not worth suffering all the way through to the end. Unless you're like me and need to hear that laugh to feel complete again. Shigeru Miyamoto once told me to my face and to the public that a delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. I don't know what he had to say about this game, which was rushed to completion, and basically had 0 input from him or any of the higher-ups at Nintendo. It's a strange, poorly designed fever dream of a Zelda game, and I wish I could say Zelda's first solo outing was a bigger success than it was. So, with that in mind, guys, I give this game my completionist rating of donate it.
Donate it.
That's all the time we have for today, guys, so please, as always, let me know about today's episode somewhere on the internet. If you like the show, do me a favor, leave a comment on why you want to see Yakuza 0 and why I'll never be here on the show. While you're at it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell to get all notifications. We do Wednesdays and Saturday videos. Check on back. We just hit 1 million subs, hopefully. Yay! You guys are the best. 1 million subscriber special next week. Have a good weekend. See you then. Bye-bye.